All right, welcome back to the next iteration of the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into a super cool topic, and that is confidence in music. How to have confidence, what value confidence has in music, and also how to, avoid being ego-driven and have true confidence. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more today in this episode, but before we dive in, I want to give you just a free gift to get you started in being confident in your mixing specifically. So if you want to have confidence in your mixes, in your masters, then I created a free course. It's called the Pro Mix Formula to give you those milestone moments that you can plant the stake in the ground of understanding the fundamental concepts of how to mix like a pro. And again, that is called the Pro Mix Formula. You can get it at promixformula.com, and it will forward you to a page where you can get that course completely free. My gift to you for watching or listening to this episode. So Nathan, tell us, What is confidence in music? What do we really mean by this term confidence when we're talking about music?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I would say confidence is like... It could probably look a whole bunch of different ways throughout the process, but I think at its base form, when we're talking about music, it's like your current skill level is sufficient enough for your goal, and you know it, right? And you're aware of it. Like when you sit down and you know what to do, or you know how to get the end product that you're trying to do, you're not fearful of that process. You're confident because you're very self-aware of your current skill level. You know what it's capable of producing for you, and you trust that. And so I feel like that's kind of overall, like at its base level, confidence in music. You sit down and you know what to do, and that doesn't have to mean confidence. Does not have to mean that you're incredible and like you're super duper competent. Like you can be confident as a beginner. You can be confident as an intermediate, right? Like you can be confident as a professional, and like. It's kind of wild. I'm just thinking now, too, like we've talked about this on the podcast before, where it's almost like that kind of delusional confidence kind of stuff is like at the highest in the very beginning, because when you're just starting and you don't know what you don't know. So you're like reaching for things and messing with things. You don't even know what you're touching, but it sounds good. So that's all that you need. And then as you go up in skill level and you get, to the intermediate professional level, you're just aware of a lot more. And so I almost think this would be an interesting conversation of like, in a way, I know that for me in my own story, be curious to hear what you think, Tyson, but like as you develop more skills and you are actually getting better, like you're getting better, and maybe you reach the point where you're being paid for this music stuff and the skills that you have, it's almost like at that point, confidence can start to drop. It's like it can start out very high when you're beginning because you're just figuring it out. But then as you learn more, the confidence can kind of drop because you're just aware. You're really aware of where you're at and what you're capable of. So like, I would love to park there for a second. What do you think about this whole confidence conversation, like in music? Would you say that is confidence? And do you see the trend kind of happening there as you progress in your journey versus when you start?
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. So in my own story, like if I think back to when I was just starting to produce for other people and, try to do that, I did a couple projects for free, which worked out really well. Like one of the top streaming songs that I've ever produced was actually from that time where I didn't know what I was doing.
I love it.
And so like that kind of helped build that initial confidence for me, at least, was, working with somebody else. You're like, okay, this project actually worked out okay. Like then that gave me the, assurance that I'm like, okay, I could actually do something. Like maybe it wasn't huge, but it was at least something, more than most average artists can produce. And so I then took that but at the same time, like I, had this like kind of imposter syndrome, right? Which most of us do at some point in time.
Yes.
I was confident enough to start putting myself out there, but I wasn't really confident enough to actually follow through. And what I mean by that was I would like reach out to somebody, we'd get a conversation going, and then I would just chicken out and I wouldn't actually like ask them like, hey, can I produce a song for you? It would just kind of die off after we, exchanged a couple greetings, and I would say like, hey, like, I like your music. And then they'd be like, thanks. And be like, okay, see ya. That's kind of like where those conversations led. And so I think that the whole like actual confidence thing is interesting when you think about the beginner confidence versus intermediate versus pro confidence, because I think you can be confident in each of those areas, but understanding and having the self-awareness to understand where your limitations lie. And I think that's the key, right? Is that you can be confident as a beginner. You can say, okay, I know how to open up my DAW and I know how to apply some plugins, but I don't know how to really use those plugins at all. So I can be confident up to that point of, right. Mixing, or up to that point of, tracking certain instruments that I've never done before. And so I think recognizing where those boundaries lie of where you are and are not confident is really key to being able to improve your skills at a very rapid pace. Because the flip side is, if you're overly confident and you're confident in skills that you don't actually have, then all of a sudden it hamstrings your growth, because you're not willing to accept advice or, listen to people who are a little bit further along in their journey in those areas, because you feel like you've either surpassed them or are at their level, when in reality you're not. I'm not sure if that really kind of makes sense, but
no, I think that makes total sense. And I think it's like, as we've kind of been talking about, if you're like, where does confidence come from? Like, you could say it comes from like having done it enough, right? Like just doing the thing over and over again, and maybe finding confidence there because you know what to do now and you get better, and maybe getting some affirmation from third parties, from people who are just objectively saying, oh, this sounds good. And you're like, oh, thank you. Like that can kind of boost you a little bit too. But I think, right, like the whole creative process, it took me a little bit to realize this. Like the whole creative process is just a series of decisions you're making over and over and over again. Like you're making a series of creative decisions, right? You're consistently deciding from when you sit down to start to work on something, no matter what sphere it is, whether you're mixing or mastering, whether it's songwriting, just coming up with melodies, right? Like you are making decisions, and probably so many, right? Like so many, like hundreds, maybe thousands of decisions through the course of a song being produced and created. You're consistently deciding yes or no, yes or no. Yeah. And I feel like confidence gets built by just being okay to say yes and it not work out, and then you have to like reroute and refigure it out, right? Like I feel like that's actually where the confidence is built, because I think what could kill you is in that, in your decision making progress, is where you're consistently saying no, or even worse, you're consistently not deciding. I think that's where you don't get a chance to even build confidence, or you just always feel clammy, cue the clam up whenever you sit down and you're like, here we go again. It's because you're not moving. Something I'll say a lot is like, you can't steer a parked car. You know what I mean? Like you have to be moving in this creative process. Movement creates so many opportunities for you. And so if you're never actually deciding anything, and you just close down the laptop, shut down Logic, or put your guitar back in its case, and you're like, I'll try it again another time. Like you're actually not, that's not how you're going to build confidence, because you're just going to get right back up to the point that you let yourself drop out last time. What do you think about that? Like the decision making and then just not deciding anything. I think that's a whole conversation.
Oh yeah. So there's so much gold in that we can extract. So the very first part is analysis paralysis, right? Kills us, especially in mixing. I feel is the biggest offender of this, because if you think about it, it's like a mix is probably tens of thousands of decisions that you make, because so say I have a very simple mix. I have, a drum set, a bass guitar, a couple electric guitars, and a vocal. Like that's the whole mix. But if I think about it, that's like, I don't know, maybe 20 tracks at most. But I have a vocal, and just on the single vocal, I'm going to apply one compressor. And on that single compressor, I have 7 or 8 parameters that I have to set. So even in that one vocal itself, I have to make a decision to use the compressor, what I want all the parameters to be at. So that's like 8 decisions. And then I have to decide, like, after that point, like, did I actually solve the issue I did, or I was intending to, right? Is the vocal more consistent now than before I applied the compression? Does it stylistically match what I wanted that compression to sound like? And so you're making just tens of decisions every single second, essentially, when you're using all of these parameters. Or, if you open up an EQ, you have like a parametric EQ, right? Like a digital EQ. You're all of a sudden have a million options that you have to basically say no to 999,000 of those to then make one decision of like, I wanted a boost right here, because there's so many options, right? When you open up these tools to use. That being said, because especially in the digital domain, we have so many options because I have a million plugins because I got Waves, super bundle or whatever it is.
Bundle, yeah.
And now I have just like 101 compressors that I could potentially use in this vocal that are all, somewhat similar. And so I then decide like, you get, again, analysis paralysis is you have so many options, you just don't know how to move forward, and then you become overwhelmed, and then you just kind of quit.
Yes.
Now, that's kind of the negative trajectory of this. Okay, so I want to break down this kind of concept, though, because I heard this from a YouTube video, and I thought it was just genius. It was applied to business, but it's so applicable to music in whatever decisions you're trying to make in music. I wanted to share it here as well. So it's basically the concept of, if you're just using the example of mixing because it's easy, when you're trying to start to mix, do you feel anxiety when you're trying to move forward in your mix, or do you feel basically sadness or depression, right? Do you feel upset? And the key difference is that anxiety indicates that you have too many options. So I basically know I have too much knowledge. I can, if I have a harsh vocal, for example, I could apply saturation and it could potentially help with the harshness of the vocal. I could apply an EQ and, cut at 3K. It might help the harsh vocal. I could apply compression because maybe it just isn't compressed enough, and, that could potentially help the harshness as well. I could pick any number of techniques, or even amongst those categories, right? I have like 15 different saturators I could use. I have 20 different EQs I could use. I have 101 different compressors that I could potentially use on this vocal. And so you just end up with too many options and you just don't know how to continue. The cure for this side of anxiety is just pick one and go with it. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, a lot of these tools could solve your problem, and you just got to pick one and move forward with it. And then on the other hand, is if you just don't know what to do, if you just don't have the knowledge of how to solve your harsh vocal, then you need to acquire more knowledge. And so the solution isn't to, just try a million things and see what works. It's to actually go out to YouTube and type in your problem of how do I fix a harsh vocal? And then you'll end up with 20 different tutorials on how to fix your harsh vocal. Watch the top 2 or 3, 4, and then pick the best option and move forward. So that is the depression or sadness when you're in the music production process, is likely you just don't know what the next step is. You just don't know what to do. In that case, go look it up. There's tons of material out there to help you. And then on the other side, if you're experiencing anxiety or overwhelm or analysis paralysis, just commit to one option. The thing about committing is that you're not really committing. You can commit to one option and go forward. And then if it doesn't turn out, you can just pick a different route. It's not that big of a deal. But just, dedicating yourself to a specific route and seeing it through to completion will get rid of that anxiety, because you'll actually be moving forward and working in a single direction. So, in this, I'm using the mixing example, obviously, but this applies to every single thing in the music process. If songwriting, production, arrangement, mastering, anything you can pick, it is, including marketing and promotion of your music as well. So if you're trying to, build a fan base, you just test something, you just pick a route and go with it. And if it doesn't work, then you can always do something else later.
Yes.
So any thoughts on that?
No, I just think that's so good. And that's what I've noticed even in sessions with people who are much more talented than me and further along, it's just fascinating how quick they move. And I don't mean quick in a way that they don't care about what they're doing. It's still quality. But they're making decisions quick, because they've realized, they've understood that, it's a kind of a volume game in a sense. If I'm trying to crack this melody or figure out this whatever or tweak this thing, I just got to make decisions and try this and try that and try that and try that. And because that in itself becomes like the roadmap. It's okay, this didn't work, but it led me to this decision. And then this creative decision didn't work, but it led me to this decision. It gave me this idea. And that was the thing. The thing that worked was a combination of my past 3 decisions. Let's put all that together. Just realizing that. And so if you're stuck, like me, I used to just sit down and I would clam up a little bit because I put so much unnecessary pressure on myself to make the right decision, right now. You know what I mean? Like, okay, if it's it's kind of like I didn't realize that I could do the shortcut Command Z, you know, like undo. You know, like it's all digital. Like you can even go back. Right? Logic even saves, right? Like the last 10 versions of your project or something. Like you can always go back. But for some reason, I was so crippled with no, this needs to be the best decision. I have to make the best decision right now, instead of just kind of zooming out and seeing, oh, this is actually how I'm going to get to where I need to go. Isn't just 3 decisions, like 3 best decisions made. It's like 100 okay-ish or bad, and the combination of all those decisions will get me to where I need to get to eventually. So it's like you just take the pressure off yourself, because you're just creating, and the creative process is not like, that's not the time to expect that you make a hit, you know, off of the first 5 decisions you make. You know what I mean? So I think that's a really good point, because I think, you know, your confidence, a lot of your confidence is built in how you're creating and how you're choosing to view the creative process for yourself, and how hard you are on yourself in that process too. I think that does a lot to build your confidence or drain it out. And like, speaking of draining it out too, like I think, you know, nothing will quite kill your confidence like someone else saying that your music sucks. You know what I mean? Like, and I think we've done an entire episode on this, so maybe we won't park here too long. I think it was episode 10. We were talking about like family members and like dealing with this whole music thing and people saying things or people not supporting you, and like, I think that's episode 10. So if you want to deep dive on that, okay, right on. If you want to deep dive on that, check that out, because we go super deep on that, and both Tyson and I actually get pretty vulnerable there, and just kind of sharing stories and how we've handled it and what we've learned and all that good stuff. So not going to go super deep into the emotional side of all that, even though it's very real. I want to, you know, honor that for sure. But nothing can really drain it or build it up too, as someone saying, hey, this is just awesome, you know, or why did you do that? You know what I mean? And like, especially depending on where you are in the process, if you're at the beginning or in the middle, like, especially, I think you're so sensitive to what other people. I gotta be careful. We're artists. We're always sensitive to what people think of our stuff. It's just like, maybe like as you go further along, you know how to interpret what people are saying, and you get a little more mature. But especially at the beginning, right? Like, it's like you're extra sensitive because it's all new and stuff like that. And I think that's such a pivotal point in confidence building, because it could just take one comment from somebody that you admire or look up to, or sometimes even someone that you're not even really close with. They just say it, but it just cut you deep anyway. And I feel like that is probably the biggest way that your confidence can be killed, is if you don't know how to properly filter that stuff. If you don't know how to properly filter comments and notes, quote unquote, from other people, and kind of know how to compartmentalize those as separate from you as a person, all that good stuff. We dive deep into that in episode 10. But anything there, Tyson, you wanted to hop in on real quick, like in terms of like killing confidence and...
Yeah, I wanted to kind of bring that back to how you build confidence too, is that obviously building confidence comes from making decisions. And so if you make decisions, right, and then those decisions turn out good, then all of a sudden you're more confident in making that same decision in the future. It's kind of a self-fulfilling, prophecy almost, is that once you commit, then all of a sudden you've made a decision. If it turns out good, then that's good feedback, and then you'll make that same decision in the future. If you make a bad decision, then all of a sudden you receive negative feedback of, my vocal now doesn't sound as good, or, that melody didn't really work there. Then all of a sudden I can just readjust. I can just make a different decision. I can go back, hit Command Z, do a different decision, and then come out with a better result. And that's ultimately where confidence is built, is just making those decisions rapidly. And so I think that's a really powerful point where you said earlier, where, the really advanced people that you're working with are making really fast decisions, because that's where they recognize like they can make a decision and then adjust as they go. So I think it's super powerful, and I think it's really practical for everybody. And then on the topic of just, other people, because, I've probably, I'm human just like everybody else. And so like whenever some YouTube troll leaves a comment on my YouTube channel that is negative, I feel that, and it's hard. It's hard to like move past that very quickly. But I think the more decisions that you've made with good results, like it helps distance you from those comments. Another thing that has been helpful and not always like immediately, but over time really helps, is if you wouldn't, I should say it this way. Most people who are leaving comments for you that are negative, that are just like mean, right? They're just trolls. Those people are generally not somebody you would ever look up to in real life, because our assumption generally is that somebody leaving this comment for me on YouTube is just like me. They have the same experience as me, and like therefore their opinion holds weight. Or maybe even we think that they have more experience than us, right? And so the inherent like flaw in our logic is that they have credibility, where in reality, a lot of those people probably don't. So think about that one guy from your high school or whatever that never did anything with their life, and they would just hate on other people. They would hate on the companies, and they would just jump on the latest bandwagon conspiracy theory that came through town every single time. Like, that's the type of person that is probably leaving that comment for you. And so just being able to like think about like, if I wouldn't look up to this person if they were standing right in front of me, then I probably don't care about their comment that much. Then again, I've also received negative criticism on my channel that was actually legitimate. And so then again, it takes a little bit of self-awareness and, reflection to understand if those comments are coming from a place that's legitimate, or if they're just trying to hate on you because they're jealous that you're doing something and they're not. So there's a lot of, it goes really deep. And again, we go into that a lot on episode 10. So you can go back to that episode as well. But I just wanted to add those comments just because I think it's always good to remind yourself of how to deal with haters, because they will come. If you do anything with your life, they will crop up out of the woodwork and try to drag you back down. So make sure that you're putting them in their proper place, taking the feedback that is actually legitimate to improve yourself, and then kind of just forgetting the rest of it, or putting that in the box in the back corner that you never open again.
100%. JT said it best. Haters gonna say it's fake, but it's so real. If you know what song that is, comment. I would be curious to see. Okay, so I love this. Like, you're talking about confidence, and part of it is it's just through doing the thing. Like, that's a big part of it, right? So it's like confidence is practice competency, right? So like if you're nervous to go, and I've been nervous to go to a studio, right? You probably haven't practiced your song enough. And this reminds me of something that one of my teachers said in high school. It's just always stuck with me. It's like my history teacher. He said, because, people were concerned about this massive test that we had coming up, so people were asking questions. And eventually he just stopped the conversation and he was like, look, if you are prepared, you have nothing to be nervous about. Yeah, like for the test. If you're prepared and prepared properly, you have nothing to be nervous about. The only reason you're going to be nervous is if you're not prepared. And it was like, and then he stopped. And I was like, for some reason that always just stuck with me. And I feel like there's a lot of truth to that, right? Like, confidence is this kind of practice competency. So think about, if you're going to the studio and you're feeling super nervous, that you feel like I don't know. I'm going to be getting careful now, Tyson. I'm thinking like, there's different layers of this too, because there could be imposter syndrome saying you don't, like, there could be a weird voice that's saying, no, well, who are you to be in a studio right now? You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But then there's also like, am I going to perform my song well? Is this going to sound good? Like, I just feel like fear just loves to pick at confidence. It just loves to start fights all the time. And it has a loud mouth, man. And if you aren't practiced enough, if you aren't confident in your abilities, if you haven't done the reps enough, I feel like that's the way that you silence that fear voice. Because when you're in the creative process, like we said, and you're making your creative decisions, there is, I think, subliminally some fear in that session right there, because you could be like, oh, what if I don't make the right decision? Or, oh, that kind of didn't sound, I don't want this to sound bad, even though it's just you in your room or whatever, So like, if you aren't practicing acknowledging that like fear's voice right there, and then choosing to persist anyway, and choosing to persist and building up that resilience, you're not going to have a reservoir of confidence at the ready to help you out. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think that's like such a nuanced conversation there, but I think it can be helpful to just remember. I don't know. I had someone also tell me that nerves just mean you care. Like, there's ways you can reframe this stuff, right? If you're nervous, it just means you care. And like, what's on the other side of this nervousness? Oh, you just want to do well. You just want to record really good vocals. You just want the song to sound good. Hey, that's awesome. Who wouldn't want that, But like being so nervous about it that now we can't perform or we can't do it, that's not going to help anything. So let's get on with it. You know what I mean? It's like, I think self-talk is probably a pretty prescriptive thing for people. If you're like, how do I get more confidence? Like, I don't know, you could be kind of weird and just talk to yourself. And you could just say like, hey, no, this is awesome. You remember that time when I made this song and X family member said it was great? Oh man, do you remember when I made this? I came up with that whole new drum sound. I did that. It's like you can like really change your mental scripts by choosing to talk to yourself and choosing to pull yourself out of any kind of pit that you might be in. Because nervousness, anxiety, I just think those are like alarm bells. You know what I mean? They're telling you that something is there. They're telling you that something's there. And I think more often than not, you can address it. And I think you can address it in a thoughtful way by just, taking heart and remembering what you've gone through and where you've been. So I kind of just went all over the place because that made me think of a whole bunch of different things in the moment. A lot of that was not even on our outline if you're listening. So my apologies. But anything there, Tyson?
Yeah, so I want to share a quick story off of that. So it was a while ago, but when I decided that I wanted to do my very first webinar training. So it was when I was first starting to try to teach other people how to mix and master, and I wanted to, kick off things right. And so I decided I'm going to do a webinar. So I prepared this webinar, and I spent a lot of time getting this webinar ready to try to, teach people how to some helpful things about mixing and then try to sell them a course, right? That's how webinars work. And so I decided to, go forward with this. And I was just like the day of, I was just like dying because I really like the recording aspect. So like right now is really fun for me because I know that I can go edit it later. And so if I say something really stupid, I'm just going to cut it out later.
There
so totally fine with this. But if this is live, all of a sudden there's way more pressure, right? Because it's like, if I say something stupid, I just like I can't take it back. Like, and then, inherently I want to feel competent in my skills and abilities. And so doing anything live like that, right, then other people may not view me as competent, and then that's like the worst thing for me. Anyway, setting that aside, I was doing this webinar, and I was just like so nervous leading up to it. And it was like, I think it was like 6 p.m. on a Tuesday or something like that. And so I was just waiting to like get off my day job to like go to this webinar the whole day. And I don't think I even got that much work done that day because I was just thinking about this webinar the whole time. And so then I finally get on the webinar, and true to form, there's, I think, 3 people that showed up.
Let's go.
And so I give this whole webinar presentation to these 3 guys that joined my webinar. And it was one of those things where it's like, after I was done with it, I was just like completely dead. I did my best, didn't sell anything, so it was totally fine. And then I like went inside and just like crashed on the couch. And then I was like complaining to my wife, and I was like, man, like I, tried so hard for this, and I, did all this stuff, and like nobody showed up to my webinar, and then nobody bought because there was only 3 people there, and whatever else. And she like looked over to me, and I always remember this. She's like, well, yeah, like you were nervous and you're upset because you cared. Like you cared so deeply about this. Like that's why you're feeling this way. And I think that is a huge part of, like Nathan mentioned, like anxiety is generally driven because you care. And that's something that you should lean into. And another thing that you had mentioned, actually in episode 2, you had mentioned this quote that fear gets a voice, but it doesn't get a vote.
Oh, totally.
I loved that quote because when you feel that fear or that anxiety coming on, then it's a good indication that you're doing something that matters to you. So you should lean into it. Don't avoid things that you're afraid of, lean into them, because one, it's something you care about, and so you should lean into it. And then two, it is also the greatest, it's the greatest potential for growth for you. And so if you lean into those fears, and that's the other thing, it's like after you've done it once or twice or three times, then you're going to be more confident because you've made that decision. You've gone through that process. You have that experience. And after you have experience, then you develop competency. Once you have competency, then you develop confidence around that thing. Once you have confidence, then fear takes a backseat. You might still have some anxiety about that activity, but it's not going to be overwhelming. It's not going to be so great that you try to avoid it by, giving yourself a cold or COVID or something.
Right. So confidence can do a lot of things. And lack of confidence can do a lot of things, right? So we've talked about obviously having confidence is awesome, and it can be a accelerator in many senses. It can fuel the creative process. It can just open so many doors and help you kind of show up as your best creative self, right? So confidence is awesome if you have it, if you're able to have it more often than not. Who wouldn't want it, right? We've also talked about how confidence can, our lack of confidence really is what can severely hinder your ability to create and show up how you want to. And it's the inverse of everything that confidence does give you. If you don't have it, all that becomes kind of like a gaping hole, so to speak. And you're a lot more sensitive to things, a lot more aware of those darker things that can mess with your creative process, like fear, doubt, imposter syndrome, all that kind of stuff. But here's the other thing, as we were talking about when we were outlining this, is that confidence can also betray you. So not only can it propel you, not only can lack of it take you down, but confidence, if you have it, you have to be careful because it can also betray you. Because confidence without competence is delusion. And Tyson, I'd love for you to riff off of this because you had some great points when we were outlining this. This is something I don't know that a lot of people would think of. It's easy to think, if I would love to have confidence, it'd be awesome. It's easy to think, if I don't have it, it's like what that's doing to me. But not a lot of people think about how it can betray you. So I would love for you to talk about that.
Yeah. And so this kind of, I think I had touched on this earlier. Confidence without competence is delusion. I love this quote. I came up with it. I'm very proud of it.
It's so good, dude.
So if you think about, you've probably seen that artist that is busking on the street corner and he's playing his guitar and he's belting out, Hey Soul Sister by Train.
Let's go.
But when you walk up and listen to him, you realize this guy cannot hold a pitch to save his life. He does not know how to sing at all. He's got zero technique. He can barely play the chords that, the four chords that are in Hey Soul Sister. And he's just all over the place vocally. Once in a while he'll nail that note, but most of the time it's just, at least half a step off. So it sounds terrible, but this guy is just into it. And so you recognize it's okay, he has confidence, but he doesn't have competence. He's not actually good at singing, even though he's confident when he's doing it. And so it's this weird, it's almost believable because he believes it. But nobody else actually recognizes his belief in that. And so this is where confidence can actually just destroy you in your music. And having a little bit of self-awareness, right, will help you not be this person. And is a really fine balance because on one hand, you can have confidence where you shouldn't, and then you're just delusional about your skills. And then on the other hand, you can have competence, but because you don't have confidence, you feel imposter syndrome. And it can happen at the flip of a hat too. Flip of a coin, you can be on one side versus the other. And obviously the place to be is in the middle. The reason why this is so dangerous though, going back to having delusion about your skills, is that you can't ever improve those skills that you're delusional about. So if you continue in your path of, I am a great singer, even if you're not, that's delusion, and that will prevent you from ever becoming a good singer because you're never actually going to work on those skills. So that is the ultimate end game for people who are delusional about their skills in music. And to be honest, like I was there for a really long time. As a producer, I thought I was really good. But as you learn more, right, about that skill, and it took me a long time to learn more because I was delusional about how good I was, I all of a sudden then figured out like, oh, I was not, there yet. And then you end up with the, what was that law that you were talking about earlier?
Oh, the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah, the Dunning and Kruger effect.
Yeah.
So basically, right, the more you know you don't know, or you don't have those skills. And so it's this cycle of, learning and then realizing what you didn't know before, and then also how far you have yet to go. So you actually feel less competent the further you go and the more you learn. And so this kind of all plays into the same concept here, right? Of feeling imposter syndrome can actually get worse as you get better. And the more you are actually have these skills, the less skillful you feel and the less confidence you have. So, to try to bring this home a little bit here is that the one way that you can help yourself from becoming delusional about your skills or not confident enough about your skills is to have an objective third party who knows you and can actually give you that proper feedback.
Yes.
Because the times that I've been validated in my skills was because I had a mentor or somebody who was a mentor type person to me who was then able to speak into my skills or my confidence and say, yes, you should be confident about this because you're good at it. And then all of a sudden, okay, now I feel that confidence that's confirmed, like I should have confidence about this thing.
Yeah.
Versus another side is actually the same person. So I have an example here. I had a mentor when I was in college, and he helped me kind of experiment with those first real production decisions, kind of the basics of mixing, all of that. And so he kind of took me aside and would just show me stuff in his room. There was no official relationship between us other than he was kind of my buddy. And he would just take me into the back room of his apartment, and he'd be showing me all of his sessions, and he's like, oh, see, look at this plugin, look what I did on here. And he's like, oh, and for your song that I heard, this song, you should pan your guitars hard right and left, it'll make your stereo image wider. I'm like, oh, okay. Just basic stuff. But it was really helpful, right? Because having a mentor there to show me. But one thing that he had said was, you should really focus on production. He's like, you're really good at production. You're one of the best, or one of the most impressive people that I know in your ability to come up with compelling productions very quickly. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I'm good at this whole production thing. But then he also told me on the other hand, he's like, when you sing, you need to hear the note in your head before you sing it. He's like, you're really pitchy when you sing. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not that good of a singer. But again, it grounded me of okay, I'm not a very good singer. I need to work on this skill, but I am good in my productions. I should really, be confident in how I'm producing things. I obviously have more room to grow, but he's like, but I have some natural talent here that I can utilize to my advantage. And it gave me some confidence to be able to continue to produce music. So I think that's a really good example of what mentorship can do for you, and people speaking into you of, yes, you should be confident, or no, you should not be confident. And that can really help you just be objective about yourself. So then you can improve down the road and actually move towards your goal very rapidly because you know those skills that you're weak on and can improve rapidly from there. So anything to add there, Nathan?
Yeah, I think that it makes me think about the value of mentorship, which we have definitely covered a lot, because both of us definitely believe in it, and have stories to back up why we believe in it. But the cool thing about having a mentor, and who's not a toxic mentor, so someone who is good and decent, like Tyson was talking about, because you get a bad mentor and that could just destroy your confidence, right? They're just weird and toxic, and they don't want you to outshine them, and they're like, no, you suck at this, but really you're awesome. You know what I mean? So assuming it's all good and well, the value of a mentor is it's kind of you get to be confident, you get to over-index on your confidence in a safe place, if that makes any sense. You get to just go for it. You get to just think the things you want to think, and like try your best at all the different parts of the process, or just you just get to be you in the hands of a good mentor. And it's kind of like you're contained. It's where if you didn't have somebody and you're just out here being cocky and confident or whatever and just doing anything all over the place, and it can get you into trouble. If you're with a mentor and you're working with someone, they have the opportunity, like what Tyson was sharing, to be able to like just say, hey, 100%, like this area, I mean, absolutely crushing it. Like I want to affirm that. This other area over here, hey, yeah, I think that there's some stuff there's an opportunity for improvement, right? Like we can keep working on this area, but it's a safe place to have that full confidence, because you know that confidence, like it's not going to hurt you. There's nothing that's going to come back that's going to like destroy you. If that makes any sense. It's like a contained way to like have that confidence, but just have a proper outlet for it, so that someone who's experienced, or people who are experienced, whoever your network is or your group or whatever, your Avengers, like we like to talk about around here, whoever you surround yourself with, like your team, you're just safe. And so you can go ahead and be confident as you feel like you are, and then let other people kind of inform you of where maybe you actually are, and then that's where that whole self-awareness conversation kind of comes into place too. But it makes me think about, kind of as we like wrap up here, Tyson, like what do you think about the difference? Okay, so confidence as a person and then confidence as the artist. Do you think that those are separate things, or do you think that that one affects the other? So like confidence as Tyson as the person, or Nathan as the human, right? Husband, father, blah, 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 like all that kind of stuff. And then confidence as the artist, like Hello Moonlight. And then for me, it's just my name. But, like, is there a difference there? Or do you think like one of those, are those two sets of confidences? Is that a word? Or is it like one? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think that they are different because you have inherently different skill sets in all of those areas. For example, I can be super confident in my ability to play bass. So bass is my main instrument, so I'm very confident that I can play bass on a track and make it sound really good and come up with some cool, unique parts. Not that anybody cares about the bass, because my wife still can't even hear it, but whatever. Setting aside that, wound.
It's still there. Readily available.
All right, anyway. But I could be, not as confident in, say, my ability to be a good father, because as of this episode, like, my baby isn't even born yet. As the time this episode airs, my baby will be, 2 or 3 months old. And so like, it's a new experience for me, and I don't have very much experience, especially with newborns. And so it's going to be a new thing for me, and a new place where I need to learn a lot, and I have a healthy amount of knowledge about what I don't know. And so I'm not very confident right now, but as I experience that for the first time and, have iterations of making decisions and experiencing this stuff, I will then become more confident at being a father, at least to a newborn, probably not a toddler, but I'm one step at a time.
One step at a time. Yeah.
So I think that's just a good example though of like, you can be confident in your mixing skills, but you may not be very confident in your, musicianship, or you may be super confident in your songwriting, but you may not be very confident in your mixing skills. So there's always these areas of strength or weakness. And talking about like just being confident as a person, I think there is a slight inherent bias towards people who are inherently confident and those who are inherently not confident. And I think that all comes back to self-awareness and the conversation of self-awareness. We've mentioned it a lot in this episode because it's so critical to understand where you're at and then be confident in where you're at. And I think that some people just inherently are self-aware enough to know where they belong in their skills, just in everyday life. And then that translates well over to their music. So if I'm just a confident person in general, I will generally carry that over to new areas, even if I don't have that much competence in that area, but it's the confidence in being a beginner. And the ability to put myself out there as a beginner in this new field that I'm going into and understanding where I'm at, and then being able to improve dramatically from there on out.
Okay, so this was a pretty good conversation. And I mean, there's a lot you can cover in 45 minutes, but there's also just a lot that you can't. So we would love to hear from you. What's your experience with confidence? Like, drop a comment, leave a review. Let us know how we can make this podcast better. All that good podcasty stuff that we need to say to get some help from you all in support of this. But also, just like, what's your take on confidence? How has confidence impacted you as a creative and as a person, if you'll be so bold? But we'd love to know that and just see if there's any other areas of confidence that we could dive into. So please be sure to let us know about that. And I wanted to leave you with a quote from good old Napoleon Hill. If you don't know who that is, he wrote a very popular book in the self-help space called Think and Grow Rich. And I'd recommend the book. It gets a little weird and kind of wacky near the end and stuff, but there's some chapters and there's some paragraphs that I think are worth reading that I have highlighted for sure. But one of these lines that I thought was really cool was this. He says, "We are who we are because of the dominating thoughts that we permit to occupy our mind." You just sit with that for a second. The word that sticks out to me there is permit. It implies that you have a choice, right? We are who we are because of the dominating thoughts you choose to occupy your mind. You know what I mean? So with this whole thing of confidence, this whole thing of fear, and this whole conversation, all the stuff that we've covered here, it can be worth remembering you have a choice. You really do. You really have a choice as a creative to choose what kind of things you're going to tell yourself and what kind of things you're going to let occupy your mind. So take heart there. Maybe step into your creative life with a bit more courage after this episode, knowing that you get to choose. And that, like Tyson said earlier, fear gets a voice. It doesn't get a vote. And start to just, change the thoughts that are in your mind consistently. And I would imagine that your confidence will start to reflect that, right? Like all that kind of stuff, that outside stuff is a reflection of what's going on inside. So maybe that's a place to start. And just kind of wanted to leave you with that quote. But another place that you might want to start, if you're just like tactically, you're like, dude, but like songs and stuff, this was cool. Thank you all for the heart to heart. Feel like I saw my therapist, which we are totally underqualified for. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. But if you're like the song thing though, yeah, how can I just make some songs? Got you. Okay, I've got a free guide that you can go get. It's at finishsongsguide.com. Clever name, I know. But it's just a 10-page PDF. It's 5 steps, friend. And you just go through it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It tactically takes you through making a song from scratch all the way to finish. From scratch all the way to finish. The cool way you can use this too is if you got some demos or some sketches, which we are like pretty hardcore against here. We want you to make songs and finish them and get after it and practice and do the reps, right? You can plug those in like step 2 or 3 or something and then just finish out 3, 4, or 5 and you got a finished song. And before you know it, like you could have a whole bunch of songs that are all of a sudden leaving your hard drive, that are leaving that folder that when you look at, you get a little creative gut punch because you're like, oh, I know what's in there and I know how good it could be. Yeah, I want you to freaking change that, make it, finish it. Get this guide. It's free. It'll help you out. It's the same workflow that I had to switch up or that I had to use to switch things up in order to start finishing songs again. Okay, hey, we appreciate you. Leave us a review, leave us a comment, let us know how else we can serve you. Grab that guide, grab Tyson's guide. We are all here to just be in your back pocket. Turn us on whenever you need some encouragement, whenever you need anything, whenever you just want to nerd out with a couple fellow musicians. We got you. Enjoy your day.